Welcome to the Stone Cottage. Now, before you start imagining me planting petunias to look like Mickey Mouse's head or creating a Donald Duck topiary, I want to reassure you that the inspiration I took from a recent trip to Disney World is not exactly what I was expecting. Most of us know the origin story of Disneyland. Walt took his little girls to ride amusement park rides, and they loved the rides, but he thought he could do better with the feel. This is what those amusement parks looked like back in the day. And with the addition of gardens and charming Disney ambiance, he really changed the amusement park industry. Now, this is the map of all of Walt Disney World. 12% of it is gardens and maintained landscape. That's 4,000 acres, or the equivalent of 3,000 football fields. There are 7 million trees, shrubs, and flowers. There are 3 million bedding plants used annually. There are 4,000 hanging baskets used each year, themed to coordinate with seasonal flowering trees, bedding plants, and architecture, and each one takes approximately 3 months to produce. There are 13,000 roses, 100 different varieties, and at Epcot it takes 400 hours per year just to remove the spent blooms. There are over 6,000 plant species at Walt Disney World from 50 nations, every continent except Antarctica. 200 topiaries with 20 different types of plants used to create them. Gardeners mow the equivalent of 18 trips around the earth each year at the equator. There's 65,000 sprinkler heads, 2,000 miles of water pipe. 10.5 million beneficial insects are released each year, and there are more than 600 horticultural professionals that take care of the grounds. Each night, all the flower beds are inspected and any trampled plants are replaced. Trees are sprayed with a growth retardant on Main Street so they don't dwarf the scaled down buildings. But I did get lots of inspiration. Now, I confess, over the years, I have dreamt of having a team of landscapers that would descend every night and invisibly whisk away all the spent blossoms and browning leaves, replacing any plants that were less than perfect with flowering plants pulled from a fully stocked greenhouse, guaranteeing that the garden was always ready for the most discerning guests. Ah, Disney magic for the gardener. So when I found out that our family trip to Disney World would coincide with the Epcot International Flower and Garden Show, I was excited to see their displays, imagining a cross between Disney and the Chelsea Flower Show. Well, I was half right. I had prepared myself for the topiaries, one of every Disney character imaginable. And you would not be disappointed if you wanted to see the huge color blocks of flowers. Now, this cutting garden in the French Pavilion was really pretty. But I recognized all the flowers and could tell which ones had been forced to bloom in a greenhouse. Given a Disney-sized budget and a few Disney cast members, even I could have created this. Now, don't get me wrong. It was really pretty, and I enjoyed seeing it. And there were fun things like all the containers with scented plants, a butterfly garden, and herbs. But I would say that most people enjoyed the seasonal food stands more than the gardens. So what exactly inspired me? Well, the second day, we went to Animal Kingdom. I had been to all the other parks multiple times, but for some reason, I'd never been there. Maybe it was because the park was new to me, but I found myself falling behind the family as I paused to look at the landscape, seeing the magic the landscapers had created. The grasslands of Africa, the Himalayas, and the imaginary world of Pandora. It was in Pandora where I sent the kids off to do rides while I explored. It was like seeing an original work of art where you can see the brushstrokes and layering of the colors. Tucked among the familiar ferns and elephant ears were these wonderful artistic little creations that represented plant life from another world. And then these wonderful little irises that were unfamiliar to me, but my daughter said, oh, those grow in Michigan. And the tree trunks, I think these are artificial tree trunks, but definitely give it a completely different feel. The variety of palms that was used is just incredible. This one has a very spherical shape at the top with its fronds. And down at the ground level are all these relatively common things. You see ferns, you see elephant ears. Not that uncommon, but tucked in among that is some artistically false but organic looking. On the left-hand side, you can see something covered with moss. On the right-hand side, you can see the blue orbs and the red plants of some variety, different shapes. Disney always likes to create a story, and the backstory for Pandora is multiple generations after the last Avatar movie, the civilization that had been built was beginning to decay a little bit, and the plants were beginning to grow over it. So we have this plant that is growing out of the building. And again, in the lower left-hand corner, you see some shape that is very organic looking, but otherworldly tucked in among the plants. And now we have trees growing out of the tops of these decaying buildings. And look at the trunks on these different types of palm trees. It's like a greenish color. And in this photo, you can very much see the layers of the trees, and then the mid-story, and then the lower story. And tucked back in there is a couple of things. One is that blue orb, and then on the lower left-hand side, another little blue growth of some time that is obviously something from Pandora. Now, I love this picture because you get a real good look at these blue fuzzy things, and you can see it has some roots coming out the bottom of it. And again, all these different shapes, different leaf shapes, different colors and textures as you look through them. This one looks like something out of a Dr. Seuss book. And again, an incredibly unique set of roots coming out of this tree. And at the base of that tree, more of those organic shapes that are unique to this imaginary world. And then hanging on the left-hand side, you can see some kind of a bromeliad that's just very organic looking. I don't know if that one's real or not. Just beautiful combinations of naturally occurring plants. Now, the test is, what's real and what has been created by the Disney Imagination team? Because not everything in there is real. Now, when I pulled back and looked up, I saw this tree, and I began to realize all of this had been built up. Now, from my research, I found that they brought in 4 million cubic yards of dirt and built not only the texture that we see within the park, but all around the park there exists a berm. Makes it a cozy dwelling from the outside world. And plants are planted on both sides of the berm. And then on the outside of the berm, let's say where the parking lot is, there is a fence built. So we don't see the fence from inside the park because it's on the other side of the berm. And the people in the parking lot don't see it because there's all kind of plant growth covering this. Now, there were 40,000 mature trees planted in Animal Kingdom, and there were over 4 million plants brought in on opening day, and that's before they built Pandora. So this is like the biggest garden in this Disney World complex. But we don't see, we are protected, which shows up over and over again throughout Disney World, is that ability to fence us in but not let us realize it. I don't know what it says about me that my two favorite places at Disney World were both imaginary worlds. In addition to Pandora at Animal Kingdom, I really enjoyed Galaxy's Edge at Hollywood Studios. Now, this is the Star Wars themed area, and George Lucas wanted to create a Wild West with, battered, broken down things and kind of a desert feel. And we definitely get that feel looking at back towards the city through the plantings in the desert surrounding the city here. I'm sure it has a name, I just don't know what it is. And if you look down closely at the ground, rather than a nice curb, you've got this lumpy looking thing holding back the dirt. And, there are dry leaves on the ground. Again, very much a desert feel. But some of those very same techniques are used here in this park. One of them is raising up the ground and having taller plants because they're up on a berm. And the berm here is created as kind of a platform for this X-Wing fighter. And the plants frame what we're looking at. The plant choices here are very different. What you see in a desert is plants with small leaves and needles. It keeps them from losing their moisture. And we also see a tree here with the one with yellow flowers that has minimal leaves. Unlike what we saw in Pandora, which were these big, generous leaves on plants that could survive with lots of water, here we have some that can survive with minimal moisture. So we're seeing some yellow, again communicating the warmth, and plant that looks kind of like a yucca, which you'd see in a desert. And here are retaining walls created from concrete, but it looks like old broken down buildings. And here are seed pods that are left to brown, again communicating that dryness and the wildness of the structures here, and some succulents. I'm a sucker for an interesting flower, and this one is on a stem that's a woody stem that's about an inch in diameter, and then you have this interesting red cluster of flowers that on a woody stem that doesn't even seem to have any leaves. So very interesting. And another spiky plant with an interesting leaf, very much a desert looking plant. Here you're getting a good look at these retaining walls that create the berms and the small leaves. So check out the leaves on this tree. Little tiny leaves that would do well in a desert. And this one looks more needle-like. Again, very much what you'd see. And these structures that look kind of like natural rock formations are made out of concrete, and they work as retaining walls to hold back dirt that the trees are planted in to make them artificially look taller, and also to block other structures. Now, I love these little purple flowers. Again, not flowering up and down the entire thing, so it looks very primitive. And you can see a structure in the background there. Galaxy's Edge, with its desert feel, is right next to Toy Story Land, I guess you'd call it. But you can see here's our desert plant. And looking into Toy Story Land, you notice that's a magnolia tree, which is very much a wet, designed for an area that has more moisture. And as we're leaving Galaxy's Edge, you'll notice on the left not only a magnolia tree, you see a trimmed shrub. And as you look into Toy Story Land, we've got some very oversized blocks next to some very carefully trimmed suburban kind of landscape. But the grass, interesting here, the grass is a tall grass, so it looks unkempt to our eye. But imagine if you were a little kid sitting on the ground, that's what the grass would look like. It would be big and tall. And you can see these topiary type trimmed up plants. And here's a cereal box. I don't know about you, but I would take cereal boxes out in the yard and eat cereal. And from Tinker Toys, I think those are the speakers. And that is bamboo that I suspect they have planted in pots to keep it under control. Now, look very carefully at that fence. It looks like it's made out of popsicle sticks. And all of this is, again, hiding a structure back there. So what's my takeaway from Disney World gardening, design, and landscape? Well, there are several things they do incredibly well. First, they develop a theme, whether it's Main Street America or another planet. Everything in the space supports the theme without breaking the magical spell. Next, they're really good at blocking unsightly views and controlling the line of sight with plants and strategically placed structures. And everywhere, they are creating dimension by layering plants and wonderful Disney creations and architecture, so your eye always has something terrific to look at. They frame their objects and views. They use unexpected plants, and they use those plants to create a mood, whether it's the playfulness of Toy Story, the nostalgia of Main Street, the mystery of a distant planet, or a foreign country. They keep everything tidy, and they pay attention to the color and the texture of small things, even a tree trunk. Now, I have made this observation before, but Disney could make more of an effort to have a place to sit and enjoy the views. So, how can I translate that into my garden? Well, first of all, I'll have lots of places to sit, but I can prioritize the feel I like. Give myself a theme. For me, that's a natural world, not an artificially groomed and perfect yard. Control where my eye goes and what I see. Is anything distracting me that I might want to obscure in some way? I'm also inspired to add more art and whimsy to my garden. But, even spending hundreds of millions of dollars, it took Disney years to create these spaces. So I'm going to be patient with myself. But this inspires me to do something in my yard that I've been wanting to do and can bring you along for. A fairy garden DIY project that I'll work on later this summer. Let me know if you've gotten any inspiration for Disney. I'd love to hear what it was. Thanks for watching. See you next time.